By 1 in the morning, Ivy Lee could tell what kind of trouble was brewing in River West by how people held their cups. Judges' wives cradled porcelain with both hands, knuckles pale, as if warmth could keep scandal out. Club owners pinched espresso handles like triggers. Off-duty cops curled fingers around ceramic and watched the door between sips, never fully seated, never fully relaxed. At Jade Lantern, Ivy's tea bar tucked between a design studio and a locksmith. Nobody came for tea alone. They came for what tea allowed, waiting without looking like they were waiting. Ivy moved through the room in silk trousers and a black blouse that never seemed to wrinkle, balancing a tray of smoky lapsang and chrysanthemum tonic like she had nothing to hide. She smiled at everyone and belonged to no one, at least in public. The bar's back wall glowed with hand-painted cranes in flight. The lighting was honey-soft. The cameras were discreet and never missed an angle. She had built all of it in 3 years with careful menus, careful payroll, careful silence. "Your husband coming tonight?" asked Mrs. Delacroix, a probate judge's wife whose pearls had outlived 3 city administrations. Ivy set down her cup. "My husband prefers black coffee and bad decisions." Mrs. Delacroix laughed too hard. Like all powerful men. Like all men who expected the room to rearrange itself around them, Ivy thought. But she only tilted her head and moved on. At 2:17 a.m., Nico Moretti stepped in out of the rainless cold, and conversations bent toward him without anyone admitting it. He wore charcoal wool and an expression polished smooth. Old money suit, old world manners, controlled smile. The kind of man who held doors and held grudges with equal elegance. He kissed Ivy once, brief and public, hand warm at her waist. "You're overworking. You're under-tipping," she murmured. He slipped a folded bill into the jar anyway, enough to cover everyone in the room twice over. Charm as spectacle, generosity as warning. No bodyguards entered behind him. They never did in here. Jade Lantern was neutral in a city that pretended neutrality still existed. For 20 minutes, Nico sat at the corner table and watched her work, saying almost nothing. Ivy had once mistaken that watchfulness for devotion in its purest form. Maybe sometimes it was. Other nights it felt like he was memorizing her in case she disappeared. At 3:06 a.m., he rose. "Come home with me now." "Last seating?" she said. "Give me 30. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, pulse to pulse. "Don't lock up alone." A request spoken like an instruction. Ivy smiled because half the room was looking. "Yes, husband." He left first. She closed at 4. By 5, she was in their penthouse 24 floors above the river. Shoes in one hand, keys in the other. City lights spilling gold across marble and glass. Nico was waiting in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, making cacio e pepe at dawn because insomnia and guilt always made him cook. They ate at the counter in silence, made comfortable by repetition. He touched her ankle with his socked foot under the stool. A private tether. At 11:58 p.m. that Friday, as every Friday, he stood at the bedroom door, adjusting his cufflinks. Ivy sat at her vanity, removing a pin from her hair. "You could just tell me." He met her eyes in the mirror. "Tell you what?" "Where you go." She held his gaze. "Why you come back with bruised ribs and split knuckles in that look?" Nico came behind her, set both hands on her shoulders. "The look?" "The one that says you left something alive that you shouldn't have." For a second, something almost like a smile ghosted at his mouth. Then it vanished. He bent, pressed a kiss to her forehead. Always the forehead, like a benediction and an apology braided together. "Sleep," he said. The lock clicked softly behind him at midnight exact. Every Friday for 3 years, Ivy told herself patience was love. in a difficult language. By dawn, patience had curdled into dread. Rain came in hard sheets around 4:40 a.m., drumming the penthouse windows until the city looked submerged. Ivy stood barefoot in the kitchen and watched Nico's untouched cup go cold. 5:30. 6. No call, no text, no encrypted ping through the private app. He insisted they both keep on their phones. By 6:12, she had stopped pretending she wasn't counting. She grabbed a blazer, slid her feet into flats, and headed for the foyer to call Dante. Nico's driver, Nico's shadow, Nico's human firewall. She never reached her phone. A droplet hit the marble near the entry rug. Dark, wet, too dark for rainwater. Another 2 feet farther, then one near the service hallway. Not drips from an umbrella, but staggered marks, uneven and heavy, like someone had paused between steps. Ivy crouched. Her fingers hovered, then touched the nearest spot. Sticky, metallic, blood already beginning to tack in the chilled air. She rose too fast, pulse climbing into her throat. Nico? No answer. The penthouse was cathedral quiet, except for rain and the low hum of concealed vents. The droplets led not to the front door, but toward the steel service entrance used by cleaners and deliveries. On the brushed metal, at shoulder height, a smeared handprint dragged downward, 5 fingers, then a slip, as if whoever touched it had nearly fallen. Ivy stared at that print until her vision narrowed to a tunnel. "Call the police," said the civilized part of her brain. "Don't you dare," said every lesson this city had taught her. Police reports became leverage. Leverage became funerals. She opened the service door. The corridor beyond smelled of bleach and concrete. More blood dotted the gray floor, leading to the freight elevator. The call button glowed. When she pressed it, the doors opened immediately, as if someone had sent it up and never ridden it. There was blood on the inner rail, too, wiped in a hurry. Ivy stepped in and then rode down 23 floors with her hand wrapped around a pocket knife she had never once used. The underground garage was mostly empty at this hour, fluorescent lights buzzing over sleeping luxury cars. Rainwater seeped under the loading dock gate in thin streams. The blood trail cut through a lane of painted pillars, disappeared briefly, then reappeared near an access door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The lock had been forced recently. One screw hung loose. Beyond it, a concrete stairwell descended into a maintenance tunnel Ivy had never known existed beneath the building and into the old warehouse grid toward Fulton Market. She should turn around. She knew she should. She kept going. The air changed first. Damp, mineral, threaded with rust and engine oil. Then voices, faint and amplified by echo, men arguing in clipped Italian and English. Ivy moved slower, hugging the wall until the stairwell opened onto a broad freight passage, where old tracks vanished into darkness. Under a hanging work light 20 yards away, Nico knelt on one knee, shirt torn at the shoulder, blood matting his hair at the temple. 2 men with pistols stood behind him. Across from him, beneath a dry patch of concrete like a stage mark, stood Salvatore Rizzi. Ivy had seen photos. They had never captured how pleasant he looked. "Agreed terms," one man was saying. "Terms change," Salvatore replied mildly. He was in an immaculate navy coat, no umbrella, shoes untouched by mud. Especially when Moretti keeps pretending he has room to negotiate. Nico's voice was rough, but steady. "I paid what was due." "You paid what was asked last month. Tonight's price is different." "For what?" Salvatore smiled without showing teeth. "For the wife who was never supposed to know." Ivy's breath caught before she could stop it. Nico's head snapped toward the sound. Their eyes met across shadow and concrete and blood. She had seen him furious, amused, aroused, bored. She had never seen terror on his face. "Ivy," he said, and it was not a command. It was a plea. Salvatore turned, following his gaze, and found her in the dark. His expression brightened like someone had lit an extra lamp. "Well," he said softly, "now we can all stop lying." Everything happened at once. One gunman pivoted toward her. Nico lunged up from his knee and drove his shoulder into the man's thighs, sending both of them crashing against a support column. A shot cracked overhead, deafening in the tunnel. Concrete spat dust near Ivy's cheek. "Run!" Nico shouted. She didn't. She stepped back, then froze as Salvatore lifted a hand and his remaining men held fire. "Not here," Salvatore said, almost bored. "She's worth more breathing." Nico was on his feet again, blood down his jaw, pistol now in his hand. Ivy never saw from where. He backed toward her, covering angles with terrifying efficiency, one arm reaching behind until he caught her wrist. "Move!" he hissed. They ran through the tunnel, up 2 flights of service stairs, through the access door, into the garage where morning had begun to pale the edges of the world. Nico shoved her behind a concrete pillar as footsteps thundered in the tunnel below. He fired once at a light fixture. Glass exploded, darkness swallowing the stair entrance. Then they were in the freight elevator, doors grinding shut, both breathing hard. Ivy pressed herself against the mirrored wall and tasted iron in the air from his blood. When the doors opened at the penthouse level, Nico dragged her inside, locked everything, and stripped off his ruined jacket. His left side was already swelling purple under the white shirt. He moved like pain was a rumor he had no time to verify. Ivy stood in the center of the living room, shaking with fury. "Start talking." He took a towel from the bar, pressed it to his temple. "Not now." She laughed once, sharp as broken glass. "I watched you kneel to Salvatore Rizzi in a sewer at dawn while men aimed guns at your head. I think now is exactly when." Nico's jaw flexed. Rain slicked the windows behind him, turning the skyline to watercolor. For a long moment he said nothing, and she felt the old pattern trying to reassert itself. His silence, her acceptance, another lie folded neatly into domestic life. Ivy stepped closer. "If you tell me to trust you, I will walk out that door and never come back." He closed his eyes briefly, as if something inside him had finally torn. "Friday nights are sanctioned," he said. "Old arrangement. I meet Rizzi alone. I pay in blood when I have to." "Pay for what?" "For you." The room seemed to tilt. Ivy gripped the edge of a chair till her knuckles hurt. "Explain." Nico set the towel down, now pink through the fabric. "Years ago when we married, I broke an agreement between families. You were promised elsewhere." "An arranged marriage," she said slowly, memories surfacing. Whispers at 23, her father suddenly gone, her mother refusing names, Nico appearing like a storm in tailored wool and impossible confidence. He nodded. "Rizzi brokered that promise. I took you anyway." "Took me?" Her voice rose. "I chose you." "I know." Pain crossed his face, real and unguarded. "But in this world, your choice wasn't the only currency. I made enemies who believed you were an asset I stole. So I made terms. I pay. They don't touch you." Ivy stared at him, at the bruises that had arrived like clockwork every Saturday, and the colder stare she had pretended not to decode. "You let me think you were cheating, gambling, anything but this. I let you think I was cruel," he said quietly. "Cruel is survivable. Targeted is not." She wanted to hit him. She wanted to hold his face and make sure he was still here. She didn't either. "What did Salvatore mean?" she asked. forcing each word flat. About me being never supposed to know. Nico looked toward the door, calculating timelines, exits, who might already be moving against them. Because now he has leverage. Before, you were hidden, untouchable if nobody could prove where your loyalties sat. Loyalties. Your father laundered money for a rival syndicate before he disappeared. Nico met her eyes. Both sides think he left access keys with you. Account routes, shell companies, ledger codes. Enough to bankrupt one empire and crown another. Ivy felt cold spread through her limbs. Precise and efficient. She had spent 3 years arranging tea leaves and pretending not to notice the way men with guns deferred to her husband. All that time, she had been a sealed vault everyone expected to crack open eventually. A phone vibrated in Nico's pocket. He checked the screen and went still. Dante says the garage cams are looped. We've got maybe 10 minutes before Rizzi's men try the building with badges. He crossed to her, hands hovering like he wanted to touch, but wasn't sure he was allowed. We leave now. Safe house first. Questions in the car. Ivy looked at those hands, steady, even bloodied. Hands that had fed her pasta at dawn and pointed guns in tunnels before sunrise. If I go with you, she said, no more blindfold marriage. No more, for your safety, silence. You tell me everything. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far below. Maybe real, maybe theater. Nico nodded once. Everything. She grabbed her keys, then paused by the foyer where his blood still marked the marble in drying constellations, evidence of a life she had refused to read. By the time the private elevator descended, Ivy understood exactly what was at risk. Not just her marriage, not just her T-bar, not just the penthouse and its polished lies. If Nico was telling the truth, her name could ignite a war between families, pull federal vultures down on all of them, and turn every smiling patron at Jade Lantern into either witness or weapon. Midnight had always taken her husband away. This time, dawn took her too. The private elevator opened into sub-basement level B3, and the first thing Ivy saw was Dante standing beside a black, armored Mercedes, with the rear door already open, engine running, jaw tight. The second thing she saw was the smear of fresh tire marks where someone had braked hard and turned out fast. Dante's eyes went to the blood on Nico's shirt, and then to Ivy's face, checking for shock, injury, hesitation. Lobby cameras just picked up 2 uniforms that aren't ours, he said. Building security says CPD. Their shoes say costume party. Nico slid into command as if pain were an accessory he could remove later. North ramp? Clear for maybe 90 seconds. Nico nodded once. Go. Ivy got in without waiting for anyone's hand. Nico followed, and Dante swung into the driver's seat. The Mercedes lurched forward, tires chirping on polished concrete. Behind them, a stairwell door banged open, and voices echoed through the garage. Down, Dante barked. Ivy ducked by instinct. 2 shots cracked, one punching a white star into the rear glass. The laminate held. Dante hit the ramp hard, clipping a yellow bollard, then burst onto the wet street and merged into early morning delivery traffic as if they were just another car in the rain. Only when they had crossed the river did Nico look at Ivy fully. You hit? No. He reached anyway, fingertips brushing her neck, shoulder, wrist. Inventory. Satisfied, he sat back and winced when the seat touched his bruised ribs. Where? Dante asked. Pilsen, Nico said. House 3. Dante glanced in the mirror. House 2's closer. House 3. Dante didn't argue again. House 3 was a narrow brick building disguised as a shuttered upholstery workshop on a quiet Pilsen side street. The roll gate groaned up just long enough for the Mercedes to slide in. Then it slammed shut behind them, sealing out rain and daylight. Inside, the safe house was less bunker than stripped apartment. Concrete floors, 2 bedrooms, blackout curtains, a kitchen stocked like someone expected siege, a woman with cropped hair and tattooed knuckles. Mara, one of Nico's shooters Ivy had seen exactly twice, met them with a trauma kit. "Sit," Mara told Nico. "I'm fine." Mara raised an eyebrow. "You're leaking." Nico sat. Ivy stood at the sink, washing tunnel dust and someone else's blood from her hands, while Mara cleaned the cut at Nico's temple and taped his ribs tight enough to make him curse in 3 languages under his breath. Dante watched the monitors. 4 exterior feeds, 1 alley cam, 1 roof cam, 1 fake storefront cam showing an empty street and rain. When Mara left to post up in the hallway, Ivy turned to Nico. "Everything," she reminded him. He took a breath that hurt. "Rizzi calls it tribute. I call it delay. Every Friday I show up, he asks for something impossible, I give him something painful, and we buy another week where your name stays off open negotiation." "Open negotiation," Ivy repeated. "As in auction." His silence confirmed it. Dante swore softly from the monitor desk. Nico continued. "When your father disappeared, he left ghosts in 10 countries and hard money in maybe 6. Nobody can find the actual roots. Rizzi believes he can force them out of you. So does everyone who owes him, everyone who fears him, and at least 1 federal task force liaison with his hand out." Ivy turned from the sink, water still dripping off her fingers. "Federal?" "Special Liaison Graham Pike," Nico said. "Officially anti-organized crime. Unofficially available for purchase in either direction." Ivy gave a short, humorless laugh. "Chicago remains efficient." Nico's mouth almost moved in answer, but a knock cut him off. 2 short, 1 long. Dante checked the peephole monitor and frowned. "Enzo," he said. Nico's expression shuddered. "Let him in." Enzo Bellini entered in a raincoat that cost as much as a starter car and eyes that never rested. Nico's underboss looked at Ivy first, then at Nico's bandaged ribs, and his nostrils flared like he smelled burning wire. "You were seen," Enzo said without preamble. "Rizzi's people are saying your wife surfaced in a tunnel. You know what that does." Nico's voice cooled. "Say what you came to say." Enzo did. "You surrender her to neutral holding until this cools. 48 hours, maybe 72. We tell the commission she's under shared protection. No one can claim you're hiding leverage." Ivy stared at him. "Neutral holding?" Enzo shrugged. "Safer than war." Nico rose too fast, pain flashing across his face. "She is not a shipment. She is a trigger," Enzo snapped. "And my crews are the ones who bleed when bosses romanticize." Ivy stepped between them before old loyalty could become new violence. "Where exactly is neutral holding? A convent? A cargo container? One of Salvatore's guest rooms with better curtains?" Enzo looked at her like she had spoken out of turn in a language he didn't respect. "With respect, Mrs. Moretti." "Don't." Ivy's tone sliced. "You don't get to Mrs. me while discussing where to store me." Dante hid something that might have been a smile. Enzo's jaw hardened. "Then you give me a better plan?" Ivy held his gaze. "I will." When Enzo left 10 minutes later, he did it with the stiff, dangerous calm of a man, obeying for now. The door locked. Nico turned to Ivy. "You don't owe him a plan. In this room? Maybe not." She wiped her hands dry and reached for her phone. "In this city, I owe everyone one before they invent one for me." Nico caught her wrist lightly. "Your phone is trackable. I built half my business on rotating devices and dead drops because I married you, remember?" She pulled free. I'm done being briefed after the explosion. I want in before the fuse. For one beat, he looked like he might forbid it. Then something in him gave way. Maybe fear, maybe respect. Maybe the simple fact that she had already walked into a tunnel instead of obeying. "Show me," he said. Ivy opened Jade Lantern's delivery backend, an app dressed up as inventory software and repurposed long ago into a quiet message lattice. Different tea blends mapped to different instructions. Oolong quantities carried numbers. Pickup windows encoded locations. It had started as a way to coordinate late-night supply runs without gossiping over calls. In Chicago, everything useful became covert eventually. She typed to May, her floor manager, "Activate monsoon menu. Courier only. No verbal confirmations." A response came 30 seconds later. "Copy. Storm protocol?" Ivy glanced at Nico, then typed, "Storm protocol. Copper Kettle." Copper Kettle meant this was no rumor drill. Real threat, real movement. Trust only riders who had worked for Ivy before she married Nico. She set 4 outbound orders, each with a distinct false relocation route hidden in reorder notes only senior staff could see. Canary traps. If one address leaked, she would know which channel broke. Nico watched her do it, then met Dante's eyes over her shoulder. "From now on, she sits in on all movement calls." Dante nodded like it had always been obvious. Outside, rain hammered the roll gate. Inside, Ivy sent her life out in coded tea orders and waited to see who tried to kill her with them. The leak answered in under 2 hours. At 11:14 a.m., Mara's burner rang from a spotter 2 blocks east of House 3. Unmarked van, 4 men, 1 long case that wasn't a guitar. They parked where they had line of sight to the building's side exit no one should have known about. Ivy looked up from the monitor bank to Nico. "Which route did they hit?" Dante pulled up her canary list, face tightening. "Route C, shared through Bellini's operations channel." Nico went very still. "Enzo or someone under him." "Either way," Ivy said, "your inner circle is ventilated." Nico didn't defend Enzo. That worried her more than denial would have. He made 3 calls in rapid succession, voice low and lethal. By the end of the 3rd, the van outside had been boxed by 2 motorcycles and a sanitation truck that happened to stall crosswise at the corner. The men melted before shots were fired, abandoning the vehicle. Inside the long case was a folded drone rifle and a printed photo of Ivy leaving her T-bar last month. Salvatore wanted her alive, but alive had a lot of painful interpretations. As if summoned by that thought, a secure, unknown number hit Nico's phone. He put it on speaker. "Mr. Moretti," drawled a familiar male voice Ivy had heard once at a charity gala and instantly disliked. "Graham Pike, we really should stop meeting under such dramatic circumstances." Nico's face hardened. "You have 30 seconds. I hear your domestic situation is unstable. I can provide federal shelter for Mrs. Moretti and transactional immunity options for you, contingent on transfer of certain financial ledgers connected to the Lee accounts." Ivy leaned toward the phone. "You mean the ledgers you already sold copies of to Ritzy?" A tiny pause, then Pike chuckled. "Mrs. Moretti, sharp as advertised." "Go to hell," Nico said and hung up. Dante muttered, "He'll be at Ritzy's table by dinner." "He already is," Ivy said. She stared at the abandoned van photo feed, then made a decision that felt like stepping off a roof and trusting she would grow wings before pavement. "I need to see my mother." Nico looked at her sharply. "No." "She kept contact with my father's old accountant after he disappeared. If anyone has hard books, she does. She cut ties with you for 3 years. She cut ties with everyone for 3 years. That's called survival. Nico paced once, rib tape pulling under his shirt. It's a trap risk. So is breathing. He stopped. Where? St. Agnes Korean Catholic on Ashland. Basement kitchen. Fridays she helps with funeral meals. Ivy checked the clock. It's Friday. They moved in 2 cars, switching once in a covered car wash and once beneath the red line tracks, where train thunder erased engine noise. Ivy wore a thrift store hoodie over her silk blouse. Nico traded his suit for a delivery jacket and baseball cap that did nothing to disguise the way people moved when he entered a space. St. Agnes sat between a laundromat and a shuttered tax service office, brick dark with rain. In the basement, steam and garlic and sesame oil filled the cinder-block kitchen. 3 elderly women looked up as Ivy entered, then looked deliberately away, like they hadn't seen a gunman at the door. Her mother, Sun Hee Lee, was cutting scallions with surgical precision. She did not look surprised. "You took too long," she said in Korean. Ivy's throat tightened unexpectedly. You stopped answering. You stopped asking the right questions. Sun Hee set down the knife, wiped her hands, and finally looked at Nico. "You are bleeding on my floor." Nico inclined his head. "Mrs. Lee, don't charm me. You are bad at it when injured." She moved to an old pantry shelf, reached behind bulk rice sacks, and pulled out a lacquered tea caddy painted with cranes almost identical to the mural at Jade Lantern. She handed it to Ivy. Inside were 2 slim ledgers wrapped in waxed cloth, a flash drive, and 1 photograph. Ivy, at 19, standing between her parents at a Lunar New Year dinner, all of them pretending the future was negotiable. Sun Hee touched the cloth bundle once. "Your father kept duplicate books and tea inventory codes. I held these in case either side came asking. They did. I said I burned everything." "Why give them now?" Ivy asked. "Because now both sides know you exist." Her mother's gaze flicked to Nico. "And because your husband's enemies are less dangerous than his allies." Nico accepted the insult without flinching. As they turned to leave, Sun Hee caught Ivy's wrist. "Do not trust men who say they protect you by deciding for you. Not even this one, especially this one." Ivy glanced at Nico waiting by the door, watchful, exhausted, still bleeding through fresh bandage at the side. "Noted," she said. Back at House 3, Dante scanned the ledgers while Ivy and Nico bent over the pages at the kitchen table. Columns of numbers disguised as tea weights, shipping routes hidden in varietal abbreviations. Then, midway through the second book, a sequence flagged in her memory from childhood stock counts. Ivy grabbed a pencil, translated the code line by line, and felt the room narrow. Commission skim, Rizzi Shell Holdings confirmed. 3 million here, 6 there, siphoned from collective funds through dock insurance fronts and ghost payrolls. Enough to destroy Salvatore if proven in front of the right audience. Dante exhaled low. "That's a death warrant." "For him," Nico said. "For whoever presents it," Dante corrected. Ivy kept flipping, adrenaline and dread sharpening her focus. On the next page, she froze. There, in her father's hand and coded cleaner than the rest, sat an entry she almost missed because it looked like ordinary allocation. Union vote transfer secured via matrimonial merge. Lee seat to Moretti block. Stabilize Moretti credit line Q3. She read it again and again. Not stolen bride. Not only forbidden love. Strategic merger. Voting power. Financial rescue. Nico, seeing her face, stilled. "What?" Ivy turned the ledger toward him, with hands suddenly steady. "Tell me what matrimonial merge means in commission language." His silence was answer enough. She stood so abruptly the chair skidded back. Where do you hold private talks no one can record? Nico blinked. What? Where? A beat. Then, St. Bridget Crypt. Good, Ivy said, grabbing the nearest pistol off the table and checking the chamber with efficient anger she didn't know she possessed. We're going to church. St. Bridget's lower crypt smelled of stone dust, candle wax, and old bargains. Niches lined the walls, plaques glinting in low light. It was where men came to swear peace over bones and break it upstairs under stained glass. Nico followed Ivy between two alcoves until she stopped near a marble angel with a chipped wing and turned, raising the gun in both hands. He halted. No one else was there. Dante waited up the stairs by instruction, out of earshot. Talk, Ivy said. Her voice did not shake. No poetry. No omissions. Nico looked at the gun, then at her face. You decoded it. I decoded enough. You didn't just marry me because you loved me and defied tradition. You married me because my family seat gave you a council vote and stopped your faction from collapsing. He closed his eyes briefly. Yes. The single syllable hit harder than shouting would have. Ivy swallowed against the burn in her throat. Were you ever going to tell me? I tried, 100 times, and every time I waited too long and it turned into another lie. That is not an answer. No, he said hoarsely. I was a coward. Rain tapped faintly through ground-level grates. Somewhere above, church bells marked noon. Nico took one careful step closer, hands open at his sides. When I made the offer, it was strategy. Your father had vanished. Your promised match would have handed Rizzi and his allies a permanent coalition. And my house was bleeding influence. Marrying you solved all of it. Ivy's grip tightened on the gun. He kept going anyway. Then I met you for tea at your mother's insistence, and you told me, with absolute calm, that if I ever lied to you, you'd make me regret surviving it. I should have walked away because I already had bad intent. I didn't. I fell in love before the vows were spoken and spent every day after trying to become a man who deserved what he'd taken. The words landed in the cold space between them, ugly and sincere. Ivy felt betrayal like ice under skin, and beneath it, the brutal clarity of recognizing the entire board at once. Salvatore skimming commission money, federal liaison on the take, Enzo's channel leaking, Nico compromised by old sins and current blood debts, herself no longer hidden and therefore either hostage or player. She lowered the gun an inch. If I walk out, what do you do? Burn everything to get you clear, he said immediately. Probably die in the process. Honest for once. Another inch lowered. He watched her like she might still pull the trigger, and he would accept it. Ivy exhaled slowly. We are done running safe house to safe house while men negotiate my value. We are done paying Salvatore every Friday like he's collecting rent on our spine. Nico's brow furrowed. What are you proposing? She lowered the gun completely, but did not holster it. Emergency Council Summit. Full attendance, witnesses, screens, redundancies. We present Rizzi's skim and Pike's collusion at the same time. Force every boss to pick a side in public before he can isolate and kill us in private. Nico stared at her, stunned despite himself. That starts a war. No, Ivy said. The war already started. This makes it expensive to lie about who started it. For the first time since the tunnel, something like fierce admiration cut through his exhaustion. Dangerous, devoted, terrified admiration. You'd stand in front of all of them? He asked. She gave him a hard, unreadable smile. I run a tea bar for judges' wives, club owners, and off-duty cops at 2 in the morning. I've been standing in front of predators for years. I just did it with porcelain instead of evidence. Above them, the church bells stopped. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Nico nodded once, a bow and a surrender all at once. Then we do it your way. Ivy holstered the pistol and walked toward the stairs. Not my way, she said without looking back. Our way. With full truth or not at all. He followed her up into the gray Chicago afternoon, where rain still fell and the city still pretended not to notice blood in its gutters. Rain sheeted across Ashland as Ivy and Nico crossed from street. Rigid steps to the waiting car, both of them moving fast, both pretending not to notice how close they walked. Dante pulled away from the curb before the doors fully shut. Two tails, he said. One gray Civic, one city utility truck that suddenly loves us. Lose one, mark the other, Nico said. Ivy was already on her phone, routing coded summons through 3 channels. Commission intermediaries, independent ward brokers, and the neutral clergy line that still carried weight with old families who preferred sin wrapped in ritual. Emergency council, full attendance. Old Opera House on Wabash, sunset. Her thumb hovered, then hit send. 30 seconds later, May called. Ivy answered on speaker. Talk. The sound that came through was not May's voice at first. It was splintering glass, someone shouting, "Down!" and the high metallic shriek of Jade Lantern's front gate being forced up wrong. Then May, breathless. They came with health inspectors and uniforms, real badges, fake paperwork. They're seizing the office drives. Nico leaned forward. Who's leading? A male voice snapped in the background, too clear, as if he wanted to be heard. Federal liaison. Step away from that terminal. Graham Pike. Ivy's pulse slammed. May, listen to me. Back freezer, lower shelf, black tin marked Puer. They already took it. Another crash. Someone cried out. Ivy recognized Thomas, one of her barbacks, all of 20 and too kind for this city. May. A scuffle. The phone fell. For 3 sickening seconds, Ivy heard only shoes, yelling, and then Pike's smooth drawl near the mic. Mrs. Moretti, your little neutral sanctuary is now an active crime scene. Funny how quickly civilization peels. The line went dead. Ivy stared at her dark screen until rain and traffic blurred outside like bad watercolor. Nico's voice was low. It was always a target. It was mine, she snapped, then hated the break in her own voice. Dante took a hard right under the tracks, tires spitting water. We can hit back. With what? Ivy demanded. A public gunfight outside my bar while cameras roll? That's exactly what he wants. He doesn't just want me dead. He wants me discredited first. Nico watched her, saying nothing, and that silence told her he agreed. Her phone buzzed with a video from an unknown number. She opened it. Jade Lantern's crane mural was shattered, paint and plaster cratered by rifle rounds. The T-wall had been turned over, canisters split open across the floor like spilled organs. 2 officers, real or rented, walked a handcuffed May past the camera while a reporter's voice, eager and breathless, said, Possible laundering front linked to organized crime wife Ivy Lee Moretti. The clip ended with a still frame of the tip jar on its side. Cash soaked dark. Ivy folded forward once, elbows on knees, as if that might keep her from splitting apart. She had built Jade Lantern cup by cup, payroll by payroll, smile by careful smile. Neutral ground wasn't just branding, it had kept civilians alive. Judges' wives, line cooks, delivery kids, people who needed one room in this city where no one got dragged into a feud. If Salvatore and Pike made the city believe that room had always been a lie, then every civilian shield she had built vanished overnight. Nico's hand touched the back of her neck, not possessive now, anchoring. He escalated because you scared him. I scared him, she said flatly, so he burned my life first. Dante checked mirrors. Gray Civic dropped, utility truck still in love. Nico looked at Ivy. We don't go to house 3 yet. We run cold for 10, then switch. No predictable patterns. Ivy lifted her head, eyes dry now. No. We go to house 3. If Pike took the bar servers, our only leverage is the ledgers from my mother and the scans we make before he gets warrants blessed retroactively. Nico studied her for half a beat, then nodded. House 3. Fast. By the time the Mercedes slipped behind the roll gate again, Ivy had 3 new alerts. City injunction hearing against Jade Lantern's business license, social feeds calling her cartel accountant, and a leaked still of her entering St. Brigid with Nico 20 minutes earlier. Salvatore hadn't just struck. He'd moved to erase her legitimacy in every arena at once, and sunset was still hours away. Mara deadbolted the gate behind them and handed Nico a fresh phone. Enzo's been calling every 3 minutes. Says half the captains won't attend any summit if Lee shows. Then we make attendance more expensive than absence, Ivy said, heading straight for the kitchen table where the ledgers waited. Dante set up 2 scanners and a Faraday sleeve station. Nico dialed Enzo and put him on speaker. Tell your captains, Nico said, that anyone absent forfeits arbitration rights for 6 months. Enzo laughed without humor. You can't enforce that while bleeding. Try me. Ivy barely heard the rest. She and Dante were feeding pages through high-speed scanners, creating encrypted duplicates, hashing each file for chain of custody verification. Every 15 pages, she checked numbers against her own handwritten transcriptions from the church table. At page 83, the lights blinked once. Dante looked up. Power dip. Mara was already moving toward the hall. No dip on backup line. That was a cut. Everything went wrong in the next 20 seconds. First, the alley cam went to static. Then came the metallic scream of the outer lock failing. Then a bullhorn. Federal Task Force, warrant service, occupants disarm and present. Mara swore. That's Pike's voice. Nico was on his feet, gun out. Rear tunnel, now. Ivy grabbed the nearest ledger and the flash drive. Dante yanked the scanner drives, shoved them into a pouch, and killed the table monitor with one punch. The first breach charge blew the front gate inward with a concussion that rattled the kitchen glass. Dust and shouts flooded in. Mara took the hallway position, rifle up. Go. I'm not leaving you, Ivy started. Mara didn't look back. You can apologize at my funeral. Move. Nico dragged Ivy through the utility room toward the maintenance crawlspace hidden behind stacked insulation rolls. Dante dropped in after them and sealed the hatch as boots thundered overhead. 3 shots cracked in rapid sequence. A 4th answered from the front room. Then silence so sudden Ivy knew, before anyone said it, what it meant. They crawled 50 yards through concrete dark that smelled like mold and copper, emerging in a storm drain 2 blocks south where rainwater ran calf-deep and filthy. Nico pushed Ivy against the wall while Dante checked behind them. Bag? Nico said. Dante opened it. Hard drives, intact. 1 scanner stick, snapped. 2, missing. Ivy looked at her own hands. Empty. The ledger she had grabbed was gone. The flash drive gone. Somewhere between breach and crawlspace, she had dropped them, or they'd been ripped free when Nico pulled her through the hatch. No, she whispered. Then louder. No. Nico gripped her shoulders. Look at me. She did, barely. We have partial scans and your transcription notes, he said. Partial, Dante corrected grimly. We were only at page 90. Skim entries start around 70, but signatures and transfer ladders continue past 150. Not enough for a clean execution in front of the full council. Enough to accuse, not enough to convict. And Mara was gone. A siren wailed somewhere above the drain grates. Nico's phone vibrated with Enzo's ringtone. He ignored it. Then Dante's burner lit up with a church contact from Saint Agnes. Dante answered, listened, and went pale. "What?" Ivy demanded. Dante swallowed once. St. Agnes' basement got hit 15 minutes ago. 2 men in city maintenance jackets. Your mother was taken. The storm drain seemed to tilt beneath Ivy's feet. She slid down the wall into cold runoff water and didn't feel it. Mother gone. Bar destroyed. Evidence compromised. Mara dead for covering their exit. For the first time since the tunnel, doubt hit clean and hard. Maybe Salvatore was right about the math. Maybe there was no path where she kept anyone alive and still won. Nico crouched in the water with her, heedless of his suit, blood, anything. Ivy. She couldn't speak. He touched his forehead to hers, rain and drain water and sweat mixing between them. "You are not allowed to disappear inside this. Not now." Her laugh came out broken. That's rich, coming from the king of strategic vanishing. His eyes flinched because she had hit bone. "I know." Dante turned away, giving them a sliver of privacy inside ruin. Ivy dragged in one breath, then another. "If we go to Summit with half evidence and no originals, he calls forgery. If we don't go, he kills your mother and writes the narrative alone," Nico said. She nodded once, hate and helplessness twined tight. "Then we go." Not because they were ready. Because there was no longer any version of not going. They sheltered in an abandoned boiler room beneath a closed municipal pool while rain turned evening streets to reflective black. Dante stood watch at the only door. Ivy sat on an overturned bucket, soaked hoodie clinging cold to her spine, rewriting ledger codes from memory into a grease-stained notebook. Across the room, Nico cleaned blood from his hands at a rusted sink that barely ran. For years he had told himself he was good at bearing pain. It was a Moretti inheritance. Break quietly, bleed privately, never let anyone see where fear lived. Fear was for men without crews depending on their face. Tonight, fear was everywhere. In the shape of Mara's last command. In Enzo's unanswered calls stacking up like accusations. In Ivy's silence while she wrote, each line of numbers a fight not to collapse. Nico braced both palms on the sink and bowed his head. He saw his father's study, walnut and smoke, age 14. Learning that affection in their house arrived only as leverage. He saw his older brother Luca on a dock at 19, shot because Nico had missed a tell and a handshake and trusted the wrong cousin. He saw every Friday night kneel before Salvatore. Calculated humiliation, precise bloodletting, one more week purchased with flesh. He had thought penance could balance theft. Marry for strategy, then love hard enough to redeem the original sin. It didn't work that way. Debt only bred new debt. Dante crossed to him quietly. "You need the rib rewrap." Nico shook his head. That wasn't a suggestion. Nico gave a short, empty smile and sat on a crate while Dante cut away soaked bandage. Bruising had spread dark across his side. Dante worked in silence for a minute, then said, "You gonna call Enzo back?" "Soon. He'll think you're shutting him out." "I am shutting him out." Dante tied the wrap tighter. "Then say it plain. Half the men are scared. Scared men choose whoever sounds certain." Nico looked past him to Ivy, shoulders hunched over the notebook, lips moving as she translated code. "Certainty got Mara killed." "No," Dante said. "Bad intel and compromised channels got Mara killed." Nico's throat tightened. I brought Ivy into this for power. Everything after is just consequences arriving on schedule. Dante's hand stilled. He had known Nico since both were boys running messages for men in better shoes. You really think she doesn't know exactly who you are? She knows what I did. That's different. Maybe. Dante knotted the bandage and stepped back. But she's still here. When Dante returned to the door, Nico stayed seated, elbows on knees, staring at the concrete floor. He imagined, for one indulgent, dangerous second, walking Ivy out of Chicago tonight, burning passports, vanishing into some coast town where no one cared about council votes. He dismissed it as quickly as it came. Fantasy was a luxury men like him paid for in other people's blood. Ivy rose and crossed to him, notebook in hand. I need your memory, she said, voice rough but steady. Your father's dock insurance shells. Did he use Bell Maritime or Bellagio Freight in 2018? Nico looked up at her. Her face was tired, furious, alive. Bell Maritime, he answered. She wrote it down, then hesitated. Mara? He held her gaze. Gone. Ivy closed her eyes once. When she opened them, they were bright with grief she refused to spill yet. She sat beside him on the crate, shoulder touching shoulder. I don't know if this works, she said. Neither do I. After a long moment, Nico said the one thing he had never said cleanly to anyone. If tonight goes bad, I can survive losing territory, money, men's respect. I can't survive you dying because of me. She didn't soothe him, didn't promise impossible safety. She only reached for his hand and laced their fingers together, hard. Then don't let it go bad, she said. For Nico, that was as close to absolution as the world offered. At 6:42 p.m., Enzo finally reached them on a secure relay. Emergency counsel accepted, he said without greeting. Opera House, 8 sharp. Full houses sending reps. They demanded neutral security. Nico laughed once, bitter. There is no neutral security left. Tell me something I don't know. Enzo lowered his voice. Rizzi made side calls. Promised immunity slices to anyone who votes you out before evidence is heard. Ivy stepped closer to the phone. And you? A pause. I'm still on this line, aren't I? Not trust, not betrayal. Just a live wire. Enzo continued. One more thing. Rizzi circulated a clip. Your mother bound, time-stamped an hour ago. He says if you fail to appear, she dies before first vote. Ivy's knuckles whitened around the notebook. Send the clip, Nico said. When it came through, they watched in silence. Sunhee sat in a metal chair under a hanging bulb, face bruised but upright, eyes furious at the camera. A handoff screen held today's newspaper in frame. Salvatore's voice, gentle as prayer. Bring me honesty at the opera, Ivy, or bring me flowers for your mother. The video cut. Dante looked at Nico. We can't guarantee extraction if he's already moved her. No, Ivy said. But if we don't walk in, she's dead on schedule. She opened her notebook and fanned out the salvaged pages, partial scans, Dante's surviving hard drives. Not enough for comfort, enough for risk. Then Nico's phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown encrypted sender with a single attachment and no text. It was a full forensic package. Authenticated bank transfers, shell company trees, Pike's burner contacts, and scanned signature pages from the missing back half of the ledger. Source tag, Chrysanthemum Relay, received via third-party order. Ivy blinked. Chrysanthemum Relay. Nico frowned. From who? An old probate-side intermediary with court access. Ivy exhaled, almost a laugh. Copper kettle protocol. May must have triggered deadman routing before they took her. Dante checked hashes fast, eyes widening. It's clean, chain of custody stamps included. Whoever sent this knew exactly what would hold up under scrutiny. For the first time in hours, possibility cracked open. Then a final message hit all their phones at once from a commission admin line. Due to credible threats, all principals must pass through Central Security disarmament. Personal guards limited to 2 per house. Stage access controlled by Ritzy-appointed interim chief until vote to order is complete. Nico read it and went cold. Interim chief is one of Salvatore's captains. Of course it is, Ivy said. Dante checked his weapon, then another. This is a kill box dressed as procedure. Ivy tucked the notebook and drives into an evidence case, snapped it shut, and met Nico's eyes. Then we walk in knowing it's a kill box, she said, and make him choke on witnesses. By 7:51 p.m., they were under the cracked marquee of the old opera house, rain needling down, searchlights cutting white fans across wet pavement. Black sedans lined the curb. Men in tailored coats and concealed holsters climbed the steps in tense pairs, pretending civility for the cameras already gathering across the street. Inside the lobby, uniformed security waited beneath peeling frescoes and crystal chandeliers gone dim with age. Too many of those uniforms wore Salvatore's posture. At the far end of the hall, beyond the metal detectors, Salvatore Rizzi stood near the auditorium doors with his hand wrapped in immaculate linen, smiling as if he were hosting a gala. He lifted 2 fingers in a small wave when he saw Ivy. Nico leaned close, voice barely audible. Last chance to abort. Ivy looked at Salvatore, then at the closed doors to the stage where the city's predators were taking their seats. No, she said. A guard stepped forward and held out a tray. Weapons. Nico and Ivy exchanged one last look, then began to disarm. The guard's tray waited under the dead chandelier. Nico set down his pistol first, then a slim backup from his boot, then the knife from his sleeve. Metal clicked against metal, too loud in the marble lobby. Ivy followed, unholstering the compact from her waistband and placing it beside his. The guard reached for her evidence case. Ivy put a hand over it. Council Charter, Article 9. Financial submissions remain sealed until quorum and witness roll. The guard glanced at Salvatore's interim chief across the lobby. The man gave the smallest nod. Fine, the guard said. Case goes through scanner. It can, Ivy said. It's paper and drives. The case slid through. No alarm. She took it back, fingers steady. Inside the false spine, wrapped in matte tape, sat a 2-shot polymer pistol small as a wallet. Invisible to old detectors. Illegal in 17 ways. Necessary in all of them. Beyond security, the opera house swallowed them whole. The auditorium had once been gold and crimson. Now it was cracked plaster and faded velvet, history rotting in elegant layers. House representatives sat in horseshoe tiers, old Italian crews, West Side outfits, Korean syndicate elders, union brokers, shipping men, 2 church intermediaries, and 3 faces Ivy recognized from city contracting boards who should never have been here at all. Every seat held someone accustomed to deciding who survived the week. Salvatore stood center stage in an immaculate black suit, left hand clasped behind his back, right hand still wrapped in white linen from some earlier injury. He smiled when Ivy and Nico entered, as if they were guests he'd hoped would finally stop being rude. Mr. and Mrs. Moretti, he said, amplified through the old house speakers. How brave of you to attend your own correction. Low laughter moved through the room. Nico didn't answer. He guided Ivy down the center aisle toward the stage. Dante and Enzo followed as their 2 allowed guards, one on each shoulder, scanning every balcony lip and lighting catwalk. Enzo leaned close without moving his mouth. Rizzi's men in security. 10 minimum. 1 in flies above stage. I see him, Dante murmured. At the foot of the stage, Salvatore opened his hands. Before we begin, motion to suspend Moretti voting rights due to compromise of household asset? Objection, Ivy said, her voice carrying farther than she expected. Heads turned, some annoyed, some interested. Salvatore arched a brow. And on what basis does the wife object? On the basis that I hold an inherited leave vote in my own name, under emergency succession rules filed 3 years ago and ignored because men preferred convenience. Ivy stepped onto the stage beside him without waiting permission. Roll call me correctly, then try that motion again. A ripple went through the tiers. 2 elders from the Korean bloc exchanged sharp looks and opened tablets. Salvatore's smile thinned by 0.5 millimeter. Very well. Mrs. Ivy Lee Moretti, provisional? Not provisional, Ivy said. Documented. She set the evidence case on the podium, plugged OneDrive into the house AV port, and nodded to the projectionist booth, where a nervous technician in borrowed tuxedo waited for orders from whichever gunman yelled loudest first. Screen 1, she called. The main curtain screen flickered. A ledger page appeared. T-weights, shipping lines, coded notation. Then Ivy's translation overlay, line by line. Commission skim entries, she said. Dock insurance fronts, ghost payrolls, shell disbursements routed through Bell Maritime or Orsini Logistics, and 5 Rizzi-controlled entities, years 2018 through current quarter. Murmurs rose, harder now. Salvatore gave a soft, disbelieving chuckle. Forgery dressed up as bookkeeping. Adorable. Ivy clicked to the next slide. Bank transfer trees, timestamps, signature blocks. Here are the corresponding transfers from 3 institutions in 2 countries, chain verified at 1941 tonight. Here is your chief accountant's signature from 6 separate filings. Here is internal liaison contact with Special Federal Liaison Graham Pike. At Pike's name, 3 men in the back row stiffened. One reached for his phone. Salvatore's tone stayed mild. You expect us to convict a colleague because a frightened wife learned PowerPoint? Ivy looked straight at him. No. I expect them to convict you because greed made you sloppy. She clicked again. This time a call log filled the screen. Pike's burner to Rizzi intermediaries, payment references, coded raid windows, including timestamps matching the attack on Jade Lantern and the breach on House 3. The room went from murmuring to electric silence. Then the man in the stage right wing moved. He was one of Salvatore's security. Broad shoulders, earpiece, hand disappearing under his jacket as he advanced toward Ivy's blind side. Nico saw him first. Ivy! Salvatore lunged at the same instant, snatching a pistol from his lieutenant's belt with his wrapped hand and swinging it up toward Ivy's chest. Ivy had already opened the evidence case. Her fingers found the taped spine, tore free the polymer pistol, and fired once from 3 feet. The shot cracked like a snapped beam. Salvatore screamed. The bullet hit his gun hand at the web between thumb and forefinger, shattering bone and sending his weapon spinning across the stage. Blood sprayed white linen and black suit. He dropped to one knee, clutching his wrist, face gone gray with shock and hatred. Chaos detonated. Nico hit the advancing lieutenant's shoulder first, driving him into the orchestra pit rail. Dante drew from an ankle rig no one had surrendered and fired upward into the flies, dropping the catwalk gunman before he could take a shot. Enzo pivoted and tackled a false uniform guard reaching for his waistband. In the tiers, bosses shouted for men to stand down, then shouted for their own men to move. then realized nobody knew whose orders still counted. Ivy didn't fire again. She stepped back from Salvatore, pistol trained center mass, voice amplified by feedback and fury. Everyone freeze. Anyone fires now, your face goes into a federal corruption package already in motion. For one absurd second, it worked. Guns hovered, bodies locked. Salvatore, panting on one knee, looked up at her with murder in his eyes and blood running down his sleeve. "You stupid girl," he hissed. "You think one hand stops me?" He slapped his good palm against a stage monitor's switch. Every screen in the opera house changed. Ivy's own face filled the curtain, security footage of her in a counting room, grainy and incriminating. Cut to a body on warehouse concrete. Cut to cash stacks. Cut to a forged transfer approval with her digital signature. A voiceover from a local news anchor. Sources confirm Ivy Lee Moretti masterminded a laundering ring tied to multiple homicides. Gasps, curses. Someone shouted, "I knew it." Salvatore smiled through pain, feral and triumphant. "You walk in with ledgers, I walk in with narrative. Let's see which one your precious civilians believe by midnight." He stood, swaying, left hand slick with his own blood, and screamed to the room, "Seize her!" 3 men moved. 2 were Rizzi soldiers. The third was one of the city contractors from the second tier, apparently armed, apparently stupid enough to commit in public. Ivy ducked behind the podium as the first shot shattered the mic stem. Nico fired once, dropping a soldier at the thigh. Dante vaulted onto the stage and kicked the contractor's gun arm wide. Muzzle flash burning a hole through velvet curtain instead of Ivy's head. Salvatore staggered backward toward the stage-left exit, shouting into his lapel mic for lockdown. Steel shutters began to grind over the auditorium doors. "Don't let him out," Enzo yelled, grappling with a guard near the aisle. Ivy slammed her hand onto the still-live podium mic. "Check your phones." No one listened. "Check your phones," she shouted again, louder, then switched to Korean and Italian in rapid sequence, the languages of half the room. "Now, before you bleed for a liar." That got them. Screens lit across the tiers as men looked down out of reflex. At first, confusion. Then a wave of startled curses, one row after another as notifications hit in clusters. Breaking. Authenticated financial evidence implicates Salvatore Rizzi in commission embezzlement. Internal Affairs emergency docket filed by Judge Hannah Park. Leaked liaison logs tie federal task force official Graham Pike to coordinated illegal raids. The local anchor feed still played overhead, but now split-screen updates from 3 separate outlets cut into it in real time, each with source verification documents attached, each citing the same cryptographic hash Ivy and Dante had seeded. Ivy stepped from behind the podium, breathing hard, voice shaking only with adrenaline. "You're watching his clip package. It's edited, unauthenticated, timestamp broken. The complete forensic set is already with journalists, 2 defense counsels, and Judge Park's internal affairs clerk with mirrored chain of custody." She looked up to the second tier, where old men with old rings were staring at their phones like they'd found snakes in their pockets. "If you shoot me, those files don't vanish. They publish cleaner. If you back him now, your names ride with his in every morning edition." A gray-haired dock boss rose slowly. "Judge Park? Judge? The IA judge?" Ivy met his gaze. "The same judge whose daughter survived because my mother hid her in 2011 when your enemies set your courthouse car on fire. Yes, that judge." That landed like a dropped anvil. Salvatore saw the room tilt away from him and changed tactics fast. He grabbed a sidearm from a fallen guard with his left hand, lurched forward, and hooked his elbow around Ivy's throat from behind, muzzle jammed to her temple. The room inhaled as one. Nico froze 3 yards away, gun up, eyes black with rage. "Drop it," Salvatore snarled at him. Blood dripped from his ruined right hand onto Ivy's shoulder. "Drop it, or I paint her brains across your evidence." Ivy felt the cold ring of the barrel, and beneath it, Salvatore's pulse rabbiting. He was hurt. He was cornered. He was still lethal. Nico's jaw worked. He lowered his gun 1 inch. Salvatore laughed, ragged. "That's right. King kneels again." Ivy moved. Not big. Not cinematic. A T-bar move, really. Wrist turn, weight shift, space made where none existed. She stomped back on Salvatore's instep, slammed the back of her head into his nose, and twisted toward his injured side. He flinched hard, grip loosening for half a second. Half a second was enough. Ivy drove her elbow into his shattered gun hand. Salvatore howled and fired wildly. The shot blew out a stage light, showering sparks. Nico crossed the distance and struck Salvatore's forearm with both hands, redirecting the muzzle to the floor, then ripped the weapon free and hurled it into the pit. Salvatore dropped, choking on blood, still trying to crawl toward the wing. Nico stood over him, chest heaving, gun now pointed straight between Salvatore's eyes. The old code hung in the air. End it now. Publicly, irrevocably. Half the room waited for execution. Ivy pressed a hand to her bruised throat and found her voice. "No." Nico didn't look away from Salvatore. "He'll keep coming. Not if he's processed clean and buried by paper instead of legend." Her eyes burned. "No martyrs, no midnight theater. We do this different." Salvatore spat blood and laughed up at them both. "Clean officers in this city?" As if on cue, the rear side door, one Salvatore's men had forgotten in the lockdown panic, slammed open. "Internal affairs, weapons down." Judge Hannah Park entered in a dark raincoat, flanked by a mixed unit in plain tactical gear with body cams lit red. Not many. Enough. Their lead sergeant was a woman with silver hair and a scarred chin Ivy recognized from Jade Lantern's back booth. One of the off-duty cops who drank jasmine and never asked questions. She leveled her weapon at Salvatore. "Rizzi, you're under arrest for racketeering, extortion, conspiracy, and attempted murder on camera in front of 200 witnesses. Hands where I can see them." Salvatore looked from Park to Ivy and realized, finally, that the board was gone from under him. His face didn't collapse. It calcified. He tried one last smile through blood. "You think cages hold men like me?" Judge Park answered for Ivy. "Not forever. Long enough." Officers hauled him up, cuffed both wrists despite the ruined hand, and marched him toward the aisle as cameras from a dozen phones captured every step. At the edge of the stage, Pike appeared near a side corridor, flanked by 2 fake uniforms, trying to slip out in the confusion. Dante saw him, pointed, and shouted. 2 IA officers peeled off and took Pike face first to a plaster column before he got 10 feet. His expensive suit went dusty. His voice went from smooth to shrill in one breath. "I have federal authority." Judge Park didn't even turn. Not anymore. By the time the shutters reopened, the opera house sounded different. Less like a battlefield. More like a courtroom after a verdict nobody expected but everyone had feared. Ivy stood center stage, throat bruised, hands shaking now that it was over, while men who had once discussed her as leverage avoided her eyes. Rain hit her face like cold pennies when she stepped outside. Flashbulbs exploded from behind barricades. Reporters shouted her name. Police radios crackled over sirens. The old marquee flickered above them, letters missing so that Opera read OPA in red neon. Nico walked beside her, one hand at her back, not steering, present. Judge Park paused under the awning with Sun Hee wrapped in a wool blanket, bruised but upright and furious at everyone. IA had raided the hostage site 40 minutes earlier from Pike's location data once his phone was seized. Ivy crossed the sidewalk in 3 strides and took her mother's face in both hands. "Are you hurt?" "Only insulted," Sun Hee said, voice rough. "Their tea was terrible." Ivy laughed and sobbed on the same breath, then hugged her hard enough to earn a hissed complaint and no resistance. May appeared next, escorted from a squad car with wrists red from cuffs, but uncuffed now. She looked wrecked, eyes swollen, and still managed. "They broke the good Gaiwan set." "I know," Ivy said, gripping her shoulders. "You triggered Chrysanthemum Relay?" May nodded once, proud and shaky. "Before Pike took my phone. You saved all of us." Nearby, Enzo stood with blood on his collar and a bandaged forearm, giving a statement to 2 captains who looked like they were recalculating their loyalties by the second. He caught Nico's eye. "Council's demanding emergency restructuring session tomorrow. They want civilian business protections in writing before anyone redraws streets." Nico glanced at Ivy. "Done." Enzo looked at her directly this time. No condescension left. "You were right about neutral ground." Ivy didn't smile. "Then act like it." Ambulance doors slammed. Salvatore's convoy rolled past under armed escort. Him visible for 1 second through rain-streaked glass, cuffed hands in his lap, expression murderous and small at once. No cheers followed. Just a city exhaling through clenched teeth. The penthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and storm when they returned after midnight. Someone had cleaned the old blood from the foyer marble. The handprint on the service door was gone. Ivy stood there a moment anyway, touching the steel where it had been, as if checking whether ghosts could be polished out. In the kitchen, Nico moved automatically toward the stove. She caught his wrist. "Don't cook to avoid talking." He gave a tired, almost guilty half-smile. Was I that obvious? Always. They sat at the counter with untouched glasses of water between them. City light pooled across the marble. Somewhere below, a siren wailed and faded. For a while, neither spoke. Then Nico said quietly, "When Salvatore had the gun to you, I saw the exact future I've spent 3 years trying to outrun. You dying because I mistook control for protection." Ivy traced the rim of her glass. "When I found the blood trail, I thought I was following you. I was following the cost of every lie we called love." He winced, accepted it. "Yes." She looked up. "So we do terms. Not promises set at 2 in the morning when we're scared. Terms." Nico nodded immediately. "Name them." "No more disappeared Fridays. If there's risk, I hear it before midnight, not after blood." "Agreed. No decisions about me without me." "You'll have it. Full financial transparency between us. Accounts, channels, debts, all of it." "Understood. If I say no to an operation that uses Jade Lantern or civilians as cover, no means no." "Done." She held his gaze. "And if you lie again, strategically or romantically, I walk. Not as threat, as boundary." His voice dropped. "Understood." He waited a beat. "My terms?" Ivy nodded. "Don't carry this alone to prove you can. You don't have to earn partnership by bleeding extra." Something in her softened despite herself. "Anything else?" "Yes." He swallowed, and for once the practiced Moretti composure failed him completely. "I need you to know this without strategy around it. I loved you before we married. I loved you when I didn't deserve to. I loved you while I was building a cage and calling it safety because I didn't know any other architecture. Tonight, when you stood on that stage and burned my old world down, I wasn't afraid you'd ruin me. I was afraid you'd finally see me clearly and leave." Ivy felt tears sting, angry and inevitable. "I do see you clearly." "And?" She reached across the counter and took his face in her hands. the way she had her mother's. And I'm still here, not because you own me, because I choose you with open eyes this time. He closed his eyes at that, breath unsteady. She rested her forehead against his. I won't be your weakness, Nico. He opened his eyes. You're not. You're the only reason I chose restraint when everything in me wanted blood. A laugh escaped her, wet and tired. Good. Because if you'd executed Salvatore on that stage, I'd have shot you myself. He actually smiled, first real smile in days. Noted, wife. Partner, she corrected. Partner. They stayed like that, foreheads together, until the clock on the oven clicked to 12 o'clock and both of them heard it. Friday had become Saturday. No door opened, no lock clicked, no one vanished. Nico stood and held out his hand. Walk. Ivy slid from her stool and took it. They went to the terrace in bare feet, the city spread below in wet black and gold, and stood shoulder to shoulder while dawn's first gray began to lift the river. 3 nights later, the emergency restructuring session convened in a federal mediation room that smelled like old carpet and new fear. Ivy sat at the long table under fluorescent light, not behind Nico but beside him, her nameplate reading Ivy Lee, council seat, Lee succession. Across from her, Enzo presented draft territorial maps with civilian corridors marked in blue. Neutral businesses registered under the new accord are non-combat zones, he said. Violation triggers immediate joint sanction. A union broker snorted. Since when do we write humanitarian law? Since your nephew got clipped outside a bakery because 2 idiots couldn't wait, Ivy said. Since social media turns every stray round into federal heat by lunchtime. Since money hates chaos more than it hates morality. No one argued that. Judge Park observed from the back wall, not smiling, just watching every signature. When it came time, Nico signed first. Ivy signed second. Then one by one, reluctant hands followed. By dusk, Pike had been formally indicted. By midnight, 3 of Salvatore's captains had flipped to save themselves. Court orders decrypted and locked every recoverable Lee ledger route, then transferred control to an audited receivership under joint judicial oversight. Ivy's father was entered in both federal and commission records as presumed dead after absconding during the original laundering collapse. By morning, Jade Lantern's injunction hearing had been reversed on evidentiary misconduct, with an apology that read like legal indigestion. Jade Lantern reopened on a Thursday at 6 p.m. The crane mural was repaired, but not perfectly. One wing still showed a faint seam where plaster met old damage. Ivy left it visible. May arranged cups at the bar with military precision. Tomas, arm in a sling, argued with a florist over peonies versus orchids. Soon he stood in the kitchen doorway criticizing everyone's knife skills and pretending she wasn't pleased to be there. Dante took his usual stool near the back, espresso untouched, eyes on the door. At 1 a.m., the room settled into its old hum. Judges' wives, club owners, off-duty cops, union men, 2 aldermanic aides pretending they were just thirsty. Waiting without looking like waiting. Mrs. Delacroix lifted her porcelain cup with both hands. I hear this place is official neutral ground now. Ivy set down a pot of jasmine and smiled. It always was. People are just finally reading the signage. Near closing, Enzo stepped in, removed his hat and placed an envelope on the bar. Compensation fund contribution, he said, awkward. For repairs. From crews that benefited. Ivy looked at him a long second, then nodded. Thank you. He hesitated. For what it's worth, Mara would have liked the new rules. Ivy swallowed. I hope so. At 11:58 p.m., the following Friday, Ivy stood in her office upstairs, jacket on, holster checked, phone charged. Nico knocked once and entered without waiting. He wore dark wool and no cufflinks tonight. "Ready?" he asked. She locked the office safe and turned out the light. "Where are we going?" "South Loop Warehouse arbitration," he said. "Boring paperwork, 2 angry cousins, 0 tunnels if I can help it." Ivy took his offered hand anyway. "Lead on." They walked through the bar together. Conversations dipped, then resumed. Cups were lifted, cradled, pinched, watched over. Same city, same habits, different rules. At the door, Dante fell in behind them, and May called from the counter, "Don't be late. Delivery's at 6. Ivy glanced back at the room she had rebuilt from splinters and rumor and stubbornness. Then she faced the rain-bright street beside her husband. Midnight came. This time, they disappeared together.